The government is actually discussing this morning if there is need and what type of retaliation there should be. The IDF, of course, will conduct in accordance to the government's directive.
As you're waking up this morning, we're reporting that Iran has carried out its first ever direct attack on Israel. Tehran's called it a retaliatory strike after its consulate in Damascus was bombed earlier this month. It blames Israeli forces for the deaths of 2 Iranian generals in that attack. Israel's military says more than 300 drones and missiles were used overnight and that it intercepted 99% of them. Let's speak now to Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner from the Israeli Defence Force. Good morning to you.
Morning, Callum.
First of all, then, this sounds like a largely successful defensive operation on the part of the Israeli military and indeed allies. Will there be a further military response from Israel?
So what clearly is a very good morning here in Israel is what we are seeing. There's been a very extensive attempt by Iran to conduct, as you rightly pointed out, the first direct attack on Israel. But for the last 6 months, Iran has been, I would be the puppet master of everything that has been happening around us. So what happened in the early hours of this morning and throughout the course of the night was a very clear show of solidarity and strength from Israel and the partners, the alliance that came together from the US, the UK, France, and others, in order to send a very clear message to Iran that they can't get away with their mischief. The IDF intercepted, together with the allies, over 99%, around 99% of those munitions and death bombs that were on their way to kill Israelis. And as you rightly pointed out, whether it's cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, or explosive drones, they were all taken out en route. Now we are currently assessing the situation. We don't think that it's necessarily over. We need to be poised and prepared for a continuation. And the government is actually discussing this morning if there is need and what type of retaliation there should be. The IDF, of course, will conduct in accordance to the government's directive.
It's interesting you say that, Peter, because Iran says the drone attack has concluded. They have all but said there is now a ceasefire in place. And so if there was a response from Israel, it would be somewhat breaking that.
And yet we've had rockets in the last hour being fired from Lebanon by Iran's proxy, Hezbollah, into Israel.
Sure, but if we can, Peter, just for the reasons that we've already outlined, if we can focus on the direct relationship here between Israel and Iran, because that is the unprecedented thing about which we are speaking this morning. So will there be, should there be, a direct response from Israel to Iran?
But Callum, maybe it's a bit misleading that we ignore the fact that Iran is the puppet master.
Sure, and we're not ignoring that. I totally take that point, Peter. We understand when we've been reflecting it all morning, but today we're focusing on that specific, that, as we say, this first ever direct attack on Israel from Iran, and I'm trying to establish whether there will be a direct retaliation from Israel against Iran.
So we will act in accordance to whatever the government instructs us based on the situation assessment. Our defensive mechanisms are indeed still very, very active. I'm happy to say that this morning the international airport in Ben Gurion and the airspace here in Israel has been reopened, which does imply that the threat is lower. But we can't really trust this player. I don't trust anything they say, and that's why we are taking necessary steps to continue to defend Israel. We will continue to work with our allies in the region in order to be prepared for any eventuality.
There is some reporting this morning, Peter, that RAF jets were involved in shooting down either drones or missiles. Can you confirm that for us?
I saw that in some of the British media this morning. I won't comment. I won't speak on behalf of the British military and defense services. We're very happy of the alliances. And of course, it proved itself that working together is a much stronger defense in this region against a very hostile player that has very little good intentions with regard to the region's regional stability. So when the US, UK, France, and others come together with Israel in this, together we're basically saving lives. That's what's good.
Okay. Do you believe that Israel's current leadership, which missed the warning signs of the October the 7th attack, has put itself into this now protracted war in Gaza, can this leadership be trusted to navigate this new, arguably more complex chapter?
I am a reservist in the service of the IDF, and I believe that we have no alternative after the 7th of October, where Hamas launched the most brutal attack on our country and on our people. And when I woke up on that morning to the alarms that sounded throughout the country, and my wife looked at me and she said, "Peter, they're coming for us." So I reported for duty. This is the very sense that most Israelis feel today. Of course, there is the government that has to guide us through the turmoil and through the stormy weather. That is their responsibility. As an IDF spokesperson, I'm very proud to be here on the front lines and speaking on behalf of the IDF, because we have a very strong responsibility to defend the people of Israel. Of course, it's not without challenges, and that's specifically what you're alluding to, is what happens as we move forward. We have a responsibility, the IDF has a responsibility, and that's why I'm here for you.
Some of the analysts we have spoken to this morning, in fact, actually, there's a growing consensus from our analysts this morning, whether that's our own correspondent or indeed other analysts from academic world, etc., are saying that in this situation, Iran has actually, perhaps inadvertently, handed a win to everyone. We know that Iran state media is showing pictures actually of vineyards in Chile burning, telling their people that that is Israel, clearly falsely, but that gives them something of a propaganda-based domestic win in Iran. Our analysts also say that because Israel's defense was successful in this attack, in defending against this attack, that Netanyahu, the IDF, can claim something of a victory there as well. Do you accept that this is a win for everyone, and with that in mind, that you could walk away from the idea of escalation right now?
There's a 7-year-old girl who's fighting for her life in hospital this morning. I don't think it's a win for her. I think that the intentions of Iran were to do as much damage as they possibly could. The successful defenses of Israel and our allies prevented them from conducting and implementing their diabolical plan. I think, this isn't a match of the day. It's something that will go on, and we have to be very, very cautious at making very deterministic statements. The reality is one that things here are very fragile. The security and stability of the region is, I would say, very, very unstable. As we look around, as we see Iran as a very, very hostile player, encouraging, financing, training, equipping all of our enemies in the region and beyond. We've had attacks over the last few hours from Iraq, from Yemen, from Lebanon, and from Iran, all under the umbrella of the Iranian hostilities. So I'd be very, very cautious at saying it's a win for this, it's a win for that. The defenses worked well together. We averted most of the damage, 99%. They were able to hit with ballistic missiles in the Nevatim Air Force Base, causing minimal damage. And indeed, we have a 7-year-old baby girl who is fighting for her life in hospital. So we have to be very cautious at making too deterministic statements. But I would say last night was a success. We have to look forward and be cautious and be poised and prepared for anything that they can deal out with us.
Sure. Isn't there a consideration here, Peter, that off the back of the success that you're talking about, that the IDF, that Netanyahu, that Israel could attempt to reclaim some moral high ground, actually? You are representing a democracy against the tyranny of Iran. There is moral high ground for claiming and saying, we draw a line. This is the end of this direct escalation. It stops here.
So I would generally agree, but I think there is something we need to also ask ourselves. I think that type of attitude also existed in Israel before the 7th of October. And that many would argue that that was the reason for such a very heavy price of women being raped, men, women, children, and elderly being abducted. And so I think there's a very, very, very thin line from a strategic perspective of what we actually do with regard to this kind of hostility towards Israel, unprecedented attack against Israel from Iran. Its proxies are extremely active in the last 6 months. What do we do? Where do we move forward? I think there's a very, very big question mark. The moral high ground is important. Does it come at the expense of Israeli lives? And that's also important.
Would you move forward without the support of allies, some that you've mentioned already? There is, again, further reporting this morning that Joe Biden would not support a counterattack on Iran. Is there any chance that Israel would move forward in isolation independently? And again, I'm speaking directly against Iran.
The IDF will operate in accordance to the government's instructions. We'll have to wait to see what develops from the internal debate here in the government.
Do you think it likely that there would be any chance of action without the support of, for example, the US?
I wouldn't want to guess.
Okay. Would you feel confident moving forward without US support?
It's not my personal perspective. I'm a spokesperson. I represent what the IDF is doing. We are conducting our operations in accordance to the government directive in order to achieve the goal, the ultimate goal of securing safety and security for the people of Israel, bringing home 133 hostages that remain in the clutches of Hamas, and creating a new reality for the region, a better security reality.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Good day, Colin.
Thank you, and to you. That's Peter Lerner from the Israeli Defence Force.
Interesting there, some of the lines that Peter gave us there. He was saying that can't let Iran get away with this mischief, which I thought was an interesting way of putting it. He was saying as well, it's a fragile situation, it's an unstable region. Things are not ending here, essentially, is what he was saying. I mean, he wouldn't go on and say that there would be an escalation, but there was very much an undertone there that this is something that is ongoing in the region.
I think what's